Open up the door, it's real. Off choice, should you open the door?
I'll be on it, it's DMX.
It is DMX.
Sure.
Okay.
That's a great case.
Alright. Okay.
Alrighty then. Which case?
We recording?
Oh, where he's going.
Are both teams ready?
Yes.
You ready?
Yep.
Welcome the Honorable Prime Minister from GWAU and every other place you've ever been to open the round in the case of choosing. You're here.
Alright, thanks everyone for being here. You ate lunch quickly or you didn't eat lunch at all. Either way, we're happy to have you here. I'm very happy to be in this demo round with really amazing debaters. Couldn't ask for a better partner. Thank you, Leighton, for being here. Chirtel, you're a phenomenal debater, great person. And Aaron, you're okay. So I wrote, at least I had the idea for this case when I was a novice. And then I immediately threw it out because it was a terrible write-up and it was just awful. And then I revisited this idea later on when I was a senior because I'm very stubborn and I'm a nerd. And I'm glad that I stuck with it. It's one of my favorite cases. It produces a great round every single time. And I think we'll do the same thing here. So, you are Superman. Superman, for those of you who don't know, is an alien, a Kryptonian to be more specific, who was sent to Earth because he had very loving parents who didn't want to see him die when their planet blew up. And he landed in the city of Smallville, Midwestern values, hey Leighton. Good old American boy. He has parents that love him. He has friends and all this stuff. Oh, and by the way, he has all these powers. So he can fly. He can go faster than a speeding bullet. He has ultra strength. He has X-ray vision. All of the things that we know Superman has, except turning back time. Aaron. So that's all good and dandy. And because this is AFTA, we now must make a decision. You just turned 18 years old. Do you become a U.S. citizen without the option of opting out of the social contract? What does that mean for the purposes of this round? It means that if you want to, for example, steal a car, you'll immediately be arrested and be taken to jail, right? You'll be charged like any other individual, and you can't break out of jail with your superpowers. But the cool thing is that because you are a citizen, you will have constitutional rights like anyone else of us. So he would be protected, or you would be protected under the U.S. Constitution. What is the other option that we have to do? Whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, except you can't be part of a social contract in this way. Or more specifically, you can't really claim allegiance to one specific country around the world. That is the only caveat that we're going to put on that side. A couple of things that we need to consider, though. Whatever you pick will be your situation forever. So you can't flip-flop. There is no more kryptonite available anywhere, so you can't die. Unless you fly to the sun. If they want to make that argument, they can go ahead and do it. All of your powers still apply, and all of your loved ones are still alive. So given that, op choice, do you become a U.S. citizen, or do whatever you want?
All your loved ones? All your parents were dead.
No. Why? I never said that.
That's
no.
dark. Your parents from Krypton.
I'm sorry. Your biological parents are dead. Your adoptive parents who love you are still alive. What are you? Yeah.
It's understandable. I don't know what you're doing.
This might sound flippant, but with all the different versions of this character we're aware of, I think it's important. Exactly how powerful should we take Superman for the purposes of this round?
For the purposes of this round, let's make him be super powerful. We're not going to use specs at all during this round. And the comic books literally are, we would consider post facto of what happens to Superman after he turns 18. This is a fresh chance to really guide him.
I guess to be clear, if I could say Superman could defeat an entire conventional army and be fine.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I just want to make it
clear. Yeah, he's pretty badass.
Oh, what is Superman like psychologically and morally at this point in his life? I think that's fair to ask.
Sure. He lives a fine life, middle class, right? Educated, American educated. Think of the average 18-year-old. There are some here. There's a lot of angst, some nervousness, the need to party. I don't know. Think of 18-year-olds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what sort of moral compass has he displayed in the past? Like, did he steal cars, or was he always a Boy Scout?
So far he's been a Boy Scout. Not a lot of chances to do a lot of tough stuff. He's
so
like he's a farm boy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No criminal record yet. Right? He probably like stole $20 from his mom. I don't know. Like, not serious things.
Good. All right, we are going to say no, do not become an American citizen.
Phenomenal. All right, everyone ready? Great. The first point that we want to talk about is literally how will your actions be guided for the rest of your life? But let's flag this point as morality. The first point we're going to talk about under this is fallibility, because you are superhuman in the physical sense. However, you are not superhuman in intelligence. Your brain is no different from anyone else, and your understanding of everything in the world comes from the lenses of human beings like you and me. Given this, you are susceptible to temptations just like any other human being is. You can be enticed by many benefits that come from unlimited power. So what do we call people that have unlimited power and a lot of things to tempt them to do bad things? We call those people dictators, people who don't have the will of the people who don't understand what it is to be elected and care about the majority of the people. And everything about your upbringing told you that dictatorships are probably bad. One person ruling around the world, no matter what the opinions of other people are, is probably not good. And you do not have the will of the people. No one votes Superman into office to be the world leader or the world dictator. Imagine the United States, a country of millions of people, a democracy, is not even allowed to be the world's like superpower or the world policeman, even though they are checked by a good system of democracy and have millions of people giving their opinion. So we think the concept of giving an 18-year-old the keys to world domination sounds a little dangerous and a little silly. So the second thing we want to talk about here is the social contract, because we don't think morality exists at all within the intrinsic values of man. One is not born with the knowledge that stealing or lying is bad, but rather the construct of society. So all of us coming together in this room and deciding what is good, deciding what is bad, and what should be forbidden is the way that we protect ourselves and the things that we care about. This point is very, very simple. As human beings, we have come together and decided that the best way to create the good life, the best way to create a good moral society is for us to talk to each other, logically arrive at a conclusion, and say that X type of behavior should never be had and will do anything possible to stop it. The problem is that X type of behavior might be something that is really compelling. So X might be a Lamborghini, and I might really want it, and I can't purchase it, so I might steal it. So the question in this round, I guess, is, if you never had to follow laws, if you could just walk around and never have to follow any type of societal construct, would you always follow the laws? Wouldn't you steal $300 if there was no penalty at all, if you could, because at that time you wanted to? Or you wanted a really bitching, really great car, and now you can get it because no one can stop you. This point is that laws are created to deter bad behavior that hurts other people, because human beings internalize doing bad things to other people all of the time because of their needs and their wants. And we tell you Superman is no different than that, and that is why you should protect this social contract, so you can understand that an individual should not be given unlimited power on this mess. So that's how we're talking about the social contract. Oh, and by the way, when you do this, you're literally telling human beings that you are a demigod. You are telling the world that I am better than you, I am more important than you, and I'm going to rule you. Why is that problematic? Because the only difference between Superman and myself is that he can fly faster than I can. He can run faster than I can. Well, I can't fly at all, first of all. And, he can destroy anything he wants. Literally, this argument is anyone who could do that should be able to rule the world. I'm really, really glad Saddam Hussein wasn't the Kryptonian that landed on the United States or anywhere, because according to these guys, we should just give him world domination. That's insanity. But the second point we want to talk about is our offensive arguments. How are we going to change the world for the better and make the world a better place? So we think the efficacy that we get as a U.S. hero is really unique, because once we go down to human beings, especially in the United States, and say, you know what, I am no different than you. I should not be considered a better person just because I have these extra physical abilities, and therefore I'm going to partake in this social contract and be equal to you. We think you'll be seen as a beloved hero once you do that. You basically gave away your right to rule over the world so you can be an equal citizen of the United States. We think this would be a pretty popular move in the United States. You would become a really influential bully pulpit. What does this mean? This means that you can tell people what you think is the right moral policy for the United States to take in certain instances. So if you think that there's a war that we need to go into, a genocide that we need to intervene in, something that we do think should be acted upon, you can advocate for those things. Or if you think the United States government is doing something bad, you can advocate against those things. But because you have this bully pulpit, you'll be successful in doing all of this. But the most important thing to remember here is that I think they picked their side because they think, well, we're going to fix the world's problems. I think the United States would like to fix the world's problems if it could. The problem is that it takes a lot of resources. Why? Because a lot of resources is tied to political capital. So we don't want to go to the Middle East because it costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of troops, it costs a lot of time, and therefore we see it as not being worthy of our capital. What does Superman do when he can say, I can go stop the genocide in a second? You don't need to use a single troop, it'll take me a day, and there will be no money involved. The United States would probably allow Superman to do that, right? So all of the international operations which facilitate human rights, that is, getting rid of dictators, stopping genocides, ensuring the international rights and international norms are basically enforced, we do that on our side of the house because the United States would do that already if it actually could. The last point we want to talk about, though, is their efficacy as, like, basically a world policeman, which is what I think they're going to try to advocate for. And if not, we'll deal with that later. So they're in a double mind, right? They either say, all right, we'll get involved as this, like, completely arbitrary actor that can't be checked upon, right? We will act only if the international organizations of the world say they can. So that's them going to the UN and saying, hey, I can stop genocides on my own if you give me permission. Why wouldn't the UN do this? Because they can't check Superman at, like, in any capacity, right? Superman can go, do an operation, do it badly, right? What are the consequences to him? Nothing. Because there's nothing that can punish Superman at that point. That is why an international organization would never say, yeah, you can do whatever you want, bro. Just go fix the world. They wouldn't trust him in that way because there's no way to check against that individual. What is the other option that they have, though? That they ignore the UN altogether. They ignore international organizations, international norms altogether. What does that mean? It means that social contracts, boundaries, basically anything legal that we consider to be important, that we came together as a society to construct, doesn't matter because one guy said that it doesn't. One guy can unilaterally say, my opinion is better, my morality is better, and therefore I'm going to apply that in a worldwide scale. Why is that problematic? Because dictators make those arguments all the time. We don't think that one individual should make a decision for the community. We think we maximize the ability of Superman to have friends, be happy, but also make sure that this power is never used in a destructive way that causes third-party harms. We're proud to propose.
I thank the Prime Minister for his speech. Now on the Leader of Opposition for an 8.5-minute speech.
You're here.
Is this a good place to stand? Over there?
Oh, yeah.
All right. I want to thank everyone for letting me come around and judge this year, for putting me in this demo round. My 4 years on NAFTA were among the most exciting and entertaining of my life, all bad things that happened to me notwithstanding. So let's jump right in. Our advocates, we get this idea from the Prime Minister that if we're not bound by American law, we're inevitably going to become a world dictator. But that's not what he told us. He told us we could be anything. So clearly I'm going to outline our advocacy. You, as Superman, are going to create a new organization, let's call it the Justice League, that will act as an advisory panel which will use coercive force to protect innocents, which will generally try to abide by international treaties like the UN Charter of Human Rights and such, and in all cases will try to work within and respect the laws of domestic states unless it is shown that this is absolutely necessary. So given that, I have 3 things I want to talk about. The first is the unique morals of the Superman compared to any real human being. And the first way your considerations are inevitably unique are that you have literally infinite power. What this means is that any conceivable thing that could be done by any individual who is essentially a god can be done by you. What this means is that when you are thinking of what goods or what bads you can do, wherever you are, if you're working for the US, if not, everything that you stand for succeeds inevitably. What this means is that you have to have as few constraints on yourself other than your own abstract principles as possible, because these abstract principles are those which you fundamentally believe to be true, are those which underlie everything that you say, and your efficacy as one individual will always outweigh everything else in the world put together. What this means is that you must put yourself in the place where you can do the greatest conceivable good, and we think when you're bound by one state with its narrow-minded policies and its particular interests, which I'll get to later, you never can do this. The second thing that we want to talk about is that you have infinite time. They tell you you are essentially immortal. What this means is you will outlive the United States. You will outlive all states as they exist right now. The only thing that's ever going to matter to you is the world as a whole, and you can't be bound by one state, because then maybe you'll be bound by their successor, which might not be so great and might change, but only you have the ability to see the long-term history with a really gigantic capital H. The third thing I would tell you under this point is that you are the only alien on Earth. What this means is that you are fundamentally an outsider to any particular human organization, even if you grew up with people, even if you were raised to follow their laws and their principles. Your biology is different, the basis for your mind and your intuitions are different. Because of this, we think you must be able to operate independently according to what you personally believe to be a higher form of authority. Second point I have off case is why we ought to be skeptical of the United States. Sure, Cobos.
So you claim that you already have this basis of morality and you should trust it. Where did you get this basis of morality?
So we think a lot of it comes from your natural intuitions, which may have Kryptonian implications. A lot of it comes from your experience with the U.S., but you weren't raised in the U.S. in a vacuum. You were learning about the rest of the world all this time, and there's no reason to think that just because I am born in a particular country, I am inevitably going to be bound to it. But more importantly, there's no reason to think I am always going to be bound to it. And we would tell you that the best parts of American moral principles are this idea of cosmopolitanism, of internationalism, of working for organization on a greater scale. And the only way to truly embody the American spirit is to cut yourself off from America. They have raised you, but your childhood is over, and it's time to set aside childish things. So let's tell us why we ought to be skeptical of the U.S. The first are, there are a lot of problems with making nationalism the basis for any moral framework. The first is particularism. When a huge group of people for centuries have been in one land area, reading the same books, thinking of the same myths, watching the same movies, they become more and more distorted from everyone else in the world, and it becomes harder and harder for them not to see themselves as the chosen people or the only people and the only good. We think this means that nationally based moralities are always going to falter, always going to take the short term, and the only way you can really get beyond that is by becoming the Justice League. Secondly, though, we tell you there's a problem of exceptionalism, which is inevitably a consequence of this particularism, of people being raised from birth to think their nation is the best in the world. Their idea is they are going to be the exception to all historical laws of the past. But you as Superman, who can see time with the biggest capital H in history imaginable, know that this is never true. The material laws of history always repeat themselves. No nation is an exception. You do not want to be bound by a system of laws, a system of practices, which you know to be faulty. The third problem is militarism. We think nations are much more likely to use force to protect their own interests than an international diffuse group who only cares about the long-term health of the world. Because you will never be pulled out of existence. This means you will never have the paranoia that affects particular states, meaning you're never going to be sent to war unless it's to prevent genocide, unless it's to do some good for human rights. You will be clear-headed. Secondly, I want to talk about problems with the U.S. particular. First, the U.S. has a history of imperialism, of trying to extend their grasp ideologically, militarily, economically, over as much of the rest of the world as possible. Secondly, they have a fundamentally paranoid politics. The United States, the majority of our citizens right now want to go to war because 2 American citizens have died in a time period where we have killed thousands upon thousands. Whether or not you think this is true, this means in a world with Superman, they're always going to press the let's send out Superman to fight these guys every time there's a terrorist attack, every time there's a slight threat to something with the U.S. Third, we would tell you that the unchecked military power of the U.S. right now has led to reckless adventurism, and the only thing deterring us is nuclear war. You know who can stop nuclear weapons? Superman. Because if I'm faster than a speeding bullet and the missiles get launched out, Superman will fly out and throw the missiles away. This happened in The Dark Knight Returns. Superman can get nuked and be fine. What this means is now the U.S. can use nuclear war, can threaten nuclear war, can operate completely unchecked. However, if Superman exists outside of America, there will always be a voice they must answer to. Third thing I want to talk about quickly is becoming Terrapolitan. I want to thank Dan Dudney for that title. The first thing I want to say is we as a world are independent on a global scale in a way that has never been true before. Look at environmental problems, the escalation of war, the foundation of the global economy. What all of this combines to mean is that every action individuals take on the small local scale have endless international implications. And in the absence of an effective international organization, because of all the nationalist particularisms I told you about, this will lead only to devastation. So we would tell you, you can actually make international organizations work. The reason the UN can't do anything now is they lack a coercive power. But now when there is a consensus, and the if you violate this, Superman will go in and stop you principle is evoked, people will listen. People will come to make mediations and end conflicts because they don't want Superman messing with them. We would also tell you that they lack a clear outside adjudicator. Now you have one, a morally upstanding youth who is free of the world, who is literally from another planet. But third, you have an infinitely greater ability to solve problems without damage because you're Superman. You don't have to kill people. You can go and take the weapons out of their hands while they're shooting at you. You can go and defuse the bombs or pick them up and throw them into the sun. This makes endless wars now inevitable and mediation perfect. Let's go on case. The first thing they tell us about is moral guidance, and they say, you're fallible because you're normal. But what we tell you is this. You represent, in many ways, the best of the American mindset, the perfect Boy Scout, the grand timescale internationalism. Everyone else in the U.S., the people who run the government, the general public, aren't nearly as morally upstanding as you. And in our world where Superman himself and his morality drive his actions, versus their world where the American government and their insane paranoid politics drive your actions, it will inevitably be worse. But second, we just question on face this idea that you ought to have some control over yourself when you have infinite power. They talk about the social contract and say basically, you care about deliberation. The deliberation the U.S. can engage in is fundamentally limited by past antipathy toward the U.S. You will never be as an international actor. Third, they talk to you about better efficacy, and basically they say, you will be seen as beloved. But how will you be seen in Iraq, or Russia, or anywhere else where the U.S. has been an enemy for decades, as a tool of American imperialism? When you talk, they will see Ronald Reagan, not Superman. Only in our world can you become free of this nightmare. They tell you you can facilitate human rights and do all this stuff in international organizations. We do it far better. Create the Justice League. Don't become a tool of the American fascists. We're proud to oppose.
I thank the leader of the opposition for a speech and invite the member of government for an equitably timed speech. Here, here.
Thanks everyone for being here today. I hope you guys are enjoying this as much as I am. I want to point out one thing to you guys. Watch Aaron. It's really funny when he doesn't have a judge to look at whenever arguments are being made. That'll be like the best part of this round. Alright. Starting off case. Okay. So the overview, or I guess framework that we get from them, is that we should set up this Justice League. I have a few questions about this. One, what the fuck is this Justice League? Who is in this Justice League? What can they do? Why would anyone work with them ever? I have no fucking clue. Here are some more detailed analysis, though. The first is that they don't have the will of any people. We think this is pretty important. I think this is especially important given that they make a bunch of arguments about how Superman is an alien and is not a person and is so distinct from people. He should probably, listen to the people of the world and see what they want to do. That seems like a good thing. The Justice League doesn't have that. Secondly, I don't think that this Justice League can live anywhere. Why would you ever let this Justice League into your world or into your country? They have a double bind. That's pretty clear. The first is that we think that you're necessarily going to have to violate sovereignty if you're going to solve all of the problems that they talk about, because you're necessarily interfering in what countries want to do when you do things like take their nukes from them or stop their political actions or anything like that. What's the problem? There's always a risk that you're not going to agree with what the country who let you in would do, which means no country wants to just have you violate their sovereignty. I think this is a double bind, which means countries will never work with you, countries will never let you live anywhere. What's even further though, this cuts you off from any human interaction at all. So Superman might not be a human, but we think he has loved ones and probably wants friends and, you know, to interact with people occasionally. I think it's a pretty sad life if for forever you can't interact with anyone at all or have any meaningful human interaction. I actually also think then that this makes Superman's morality way worse, right? If you don't have any reason to live, if you can't have any meaningful interactions, you just become a nihilistic fuck who's always going to do hedonistic things with no check. They never address the point that you have these temptations that you're going to give into. That if you have no punishment at all and you want a Lamborghini, you're just going to go take that I mean, I don't know why Superman wants a Lamborghini because he can fly, but like you're just going to go take it because that's what you want. You don't have any checks on you. When you don't have any personal checks on you because you have no ties to anything at all, I don't think you're ever going to take any good action. They never address this at all. I think that's a reason that you're always going to do this. But what's more is that this isn't just a normative statement. We're not like, we give you reasoning why Superman would actually decide to do this, which is that he was brought up this way. We think this is very important. They don't talk about it. I'll address it more later. But on to the actual off-case points that Trick gives you. The first one is that you have a unique this is funny. You have a unique morality, and you have infinite power, and, like, everything that you stand for will be successful. So, obviously, you need to have as few constraints as possible. I did not understand this point because I literally thought it was a point for us. If you have infinite success rate, then you should probably have some constraints on you, especially when the arguments that we get on the off case are that you have such a distinct way of thinking from people and that you are so different from them. I think you should probably have a few constraints on you, and I think as an 18-year-old in particular, this is especially important because what do 18-year-old Apta, what did you do last night? Like, I think that Superman should probably have some checks on him. I think that's like pretty important. But I also think, remember we tell you he doesn't have superhuman intelligence, so he might think differently from people, but he's not a genius. He doesn't have anything better. They need to warrant to you why what Superman wants is the correct thing. Like, yeah, he has a 100% success rate, but he doesn't have a 100% wanting moral goods rate. That doesn't make any sense at all. I think that's a further reason that you need to have checks. But finally, I would tell you that when they don't have links to humanity on their side, as I told you before, because no one's going to let you in, you can't see your loved ones because the United States certainly isn't going to let you in, then I don't think that the moral goods that you want are actually going to be good. They then tell you that you're going to outlive the United States and you don't want to be bound by one state because what about the successor? I would tell you we are fundamentally changing the nation state on our side of the house. There is no reason the United States would fall if they have Superman. And this isn't an argument saying that the United States is just going to become like this world superpower dictator. I actually think this is a really good argument about holding the United States accountable to its democratic ideals. Why is this? We tell you that as Superman, you will have the will of the people behind you. This holds the United States accountable to their humanitarian goals, where right now they don't go in to stop the problem with ISIS or in the Middle East because they can say or because of political capital reasons or resources. On our side of the house, we think we should get involved and we should stop ethnic cleansing before it happens. This holds the United States accountable to make sure that they actually stop these ideals. They can't actually do this on their side of the house. I also think that then you can use this to create more democracy. Like, they make a lot of points about how the United States is imperialistic. One, I don't think we're, like, colonizing people anymore. I think this is fundamentally something that happened in the past and is very different. But secondly, I would say if imperialism in our side of the house is making sure that people are democratic, making sure that there isn't things like genocide or ethnic cleansing, then I think we're fine with fighting the harm that people are going to respect human rights more because they're following in the United States' lead. I think we're okay with that. Then we get that you're not a human, that you're an alien, you're different, you need to, and okay, two things. Yeah, so you're not a human, you're different. I've already addressed this a lot. I think that's a reason you should have checked, that you should be accountable to the world population. Then he tells you that you learn about the rest of the world as Superman. So a few things. First, if this is true, if this is true, then I think that he has, like, a cosmopolitan morality, but the only way that he can actually enforce it or have it be meaningful in the world for all of the reasons I've listed is if he works with the United States. But secondly, I would tell you that if this is true, that Superman somehow got this, in his, small town in Iowa, if he got this cosmopolitan worldview, right, or, Iowa or whatever, then, I think that so did everyone else, right? I don't understand. In which case, Superman isn't special and shouldn't have, these special, shouldn't have this special consideration into his morality. They don't give you any reason why Superman specially has access to understanding the morality in the rest of the world at all. Which leads me to their second point about skepticism of the United States. They tell you, nationalism is bad for all of these reasons because, the United States is super particular and doesn't understand other countries. But they literally just told you that Superman had access to all of this. This doesn't make any sense. But even if they're going to make the argument that Superman could, like, fly to these countries and learn about them, I would tell you that globalization is certainly happening in the world. I don't think that the country is as insular as it once was. But moreover, I think that, like, when they talk about exceptionalism and faulty laws, we can fix it. Like, having Superman be this power means that he can use his bully pulpit to change and have people understand that humanitarian goals are achievable and something that we can actually hold the government accountable for, and people will actually care about it. Then they tell you that there's reckless adventurism, like with nukes. And then the example that we get, and paranoia and imperialism, but I already dealt with that. Then they tell you there's reckless adventurism with nukes, and, like, we want to go kill ISIS because 2 journalists got, like, beheaded. So on our side of the house, we would have stopped ISIS way before that even happened. We would have stopped ISIS when they were killing people, like everyone in a particular religion, or in multiple religions in this case. So I think that's like a good example as to why we should have Superman on our side of the house. I think this makes sense. But finally, to this whole point, I want to point out that they think they're following international law, right? There's no way they can take any of these actions if they are counter the U.S. interest in the status quo, because the UN is always going to veto them, or the U.S. will always veto it on the Security Council, which means that they're always biting into our double bind that I gave you at the top even more. I don't think that they can actually take any actions, because the Justice League is always going to be violating international law and international norms. The third argument we get is international implications. Something about how people will listen. You can, like, basically, this argument is that, like, you will be able to do a lot. We don't think you will, for all the reasons I gave you before, but in an additional one, I guess, is that you don't have the knowledge or military intel or anything like that to actually solve any of these problems. On our side of the house, you have the entire United States intelligence community and national security apparatus giving you, like, where you need to go, what you can do, what the problems of the world are. I think you're actually going to be able to solve problems effectively. On case, really quickly, I think I dealt with it a lot, and I don't think there are a lot of responses. The first argument we give you is about how your moral compass won't be good without the United States. They don't respond to this at all. Remember, we tell you the social contract is necessary for this. The only response we get is that Superman is a Boy Scout right now, and others don't have the same moral understanding. This doesn't make any sense. I've already talked to you about this, but moreover, I think that once you take away the social contract from him, that he doesn't have anything to guide his actions any further. So I don't think they can have continued morality, even if they think his morality is okay right now. Remember, he doesn't have superhuman intelligence anyway, though. But remember, this action is also saying that you are better than humans. We think this is fundamentally problematic. The second argument we give you is that we can make the world a better place for a lot of reasons. All they say is that you can never be international. I don't think this is true. In fact, I think the international community will fall in line with a lot of things, humanitarian ideals that the United States has. Remember, we're fine with, like, spreading that. We're fine with protecting democracy and human rights. I think that's going to be good. And that you can be a policy advisor and advocate for good things. The third argument we give you is your efficacy as a world policeman. He just says you'll be seen as a tool of imperialism. I just don't think that this is going to be true, because we're fundamentally shifting the way that we're actually achieving policy and can actually achieve humanitarian goals. For these reasons, very proud to propose.
You're good. I think the member of government, member of opposition, you're here.
When you leave this round, you're going to need a standard. How are you voting? How do you determine who you're voting for? What we've presented on side opposition is a very clear framework. The standard of this round ultimately is utility. Now, why is that the case? Because at the end of the day, we don't think you can stand up and ask, how many friends is Superman going to have? How much empathy can he feel? How much can he relate to people? Why? Because all humans are ultimately going to die. They are mortal, which means that even on their side of the house, in the best instance, people live for such a small fraction of his lifeline that we don't think he can meaningfully engage with them anyway, or have this, like, robust friendship in the way that they're describing. I don't think this could be a meaningful standard, especially at the point where lives are literally in the balance. The only other framework that it might be is this idea of, we need to, like, respect the social contract and things like that. But they only tell you that that's good because it creates more utility, because they say that that is how we aggregate preferences. So if we demonstrate in the long term they don't get most utility, then they also lose on that framework as well. That is your framework. Whichever side is the best utility wins this debate in the end. So given that, we need to examine their side and how they try to get utility, and then our side. I'm going to very clearly in my overview demonstrate why we get preferable utility. So first, their side of the case. Why do they believe they can help America? So what they tell you is that, we're going to be able to influence the American political system and get people to do great things. Here's the problem. On their side of the house, while they are super, they have special powers, they still have to, for example, lobby within the American political system. They have to try to sway people within America to agree to the very policy positions they say are important. Interestingly enough, we already have people trying to do these sorts of things, like wealthy liberal individuals who want people to be more altruistic, who support goals like humanitarianism, and already tried to sway the American public, and they aren't that successful. Why? Because even if Superman is phenomenal, everyone likes him, and he tells them to do altruistic things, when that runs goes against American pragmatic interests, the American people still will not vote for those policies. If it means that their clothes have to be more expensive, or it means that they have to have a lower standard of living, they still will not support that policy anyway on their side of the house. But here's the even bigger problem. I have no idea why. Like, say it was true. Say you were to intervene for them and say, I actually think it's the case that they can completely sway the American public to whatever they want. Then what is the difference between our side of the house, where we say we're going to decide what is good, and their side of the house, where they claim that they can direct all of America towards whatever objective Superman has decided is good? On both sides of the house, we ultimately try to guide the country, like the world or the country in a certain direction. It's just that on their side of the house, they're constrained. By what? Things like laws that America has constructed that specifically prohibit U.S. citizens from doing things even if they would be good for the world. What is an example of this? Something like the Bumpers Amendment, where, for example, we cannot build agriculture industries in countries and help them get off the ground if those would conflict with our own industries. Literally in Afghanistan right now, we could have had people growing cotton and almost solved the entire problem of poppy and the Taliban, but we didn't because we have laws that prohibit this just because it runs up against our own lobbies. On their side of the house, when you're an American citizen, you cannot do good because American pragmatic interests will destroy you when you try to take that action. That is the problem for them on their side of the house. I think it's a massive problem. But the other thing is that it also doesn't work if they become perverted by America, right? So I know it's going to come in PMR. They're going to say, well, no, we're not going to do whatever America tells us, just some of the things that America tells us. Like, no, you said we would have stopped ISIS a long time ago. But that means is that their incentive analysis is when the American government decides they maybe have a problem with a group of people that they don't agree with ideologically in another country, they're going to be willing to go in. Why is that a problem? For the same reasons they told you were a problem with our side of the case. How did we solve it? We said we would constrain our actions and not engage if we could have mediation first, which means we don't have those problems on our side of the house. Furthermore, Chart tells you that they will literally just send Superman in to engage in these conflicts, that he will create the problems. They never explain why he wouldn't be sent in, why he wouldn't be used by the American government in this way. So that is a problem. So I simply do not buy that they have barely any pragmatic efficacy. I think that's a problem. So why do we think we can do it? Well, firstly, we told you because Superman is moral. They're like, well, what warrants did you give why Superman is a moral actor? So I think Chart gave you a lot of warrants. The first one that Chart gave you was that when an individual has average intelligence, but they live for an infinite amount of time, that functionally becomes super intelligence on a long enough timeline because they can apply the average intelligence over so long and they can learn for such a long period of time that they can come to do better things. And why is that important? Because we would tell you that the highest form of intelligence is to accept altruism because the greatest good is actually what's best for the most people, which means that in the long term, Superman will coalesce and will acquiesce to a moral framework. That's important because we think then he can actually do good things for the world and help society build and grow. Furthermore, what we would tell you is that they say like, oh, you grew up in America. We agree. That is 18 years of your life. And now for like functional infinity, we tell you won't be an American citizen, which means you are no longer constrained by that imperialistic, nationalistic framework. We tell you that all of that is good. We also tell you in our side of the house that the primary reason why Superman can be more moral than everyone else is because he's not constrained by scarcity. The primary reason why people break down in their actual adherence to moral frameworks is because they're afraid they won't eat or have food or things like this. But Superman doesn't have those problems, which means that he can simply assess what is best for people without taking into account his own considerations. That we think is meaningful. Let's briefly go through the so then let's switch to how we actually say that we can solve these problems in the world. So basically what they say is like, you didn't define your Justice League. What Church said is we're going to be an organization that helps people. We're going to respect human rights and treaties. We never said that we couldn't like try to do certain, like we had to ask the UN for permission for everything. What Church said is that we respect existing agreements, things like national boundaries and things like that. On our side house, we have to go into people's countries and take their nukes from them, take the missiles from them. We will just stop those nukes or missiles from hitting targets if they launch them at other people. That also means that you solve the conflict which is going in the world and produce a better system. What about things like world hunger, where we said we could solve that? What was their response? Like, they said we could do it too. Not if the U.S. doesn't want you to send food aid to those countries. Like, what if we have something like comprehensive sanctions? I don't know, a country like maybe Iran or something like that, and now there's like a drought or so many people are starving. They cannot help those people, but we can on our side of the house. That is why, based on simple utility, our side of the house will always be preferable to whatever they are offering you. Why? Because on their side of the house, they're constrained by the American political system. They give you the very arguments why they will then be used as a pawn by that system, and on our side of the house, we are preferable. The only argument you could give them as well, at least on their side of the house, we're constrained because we have consequences for our actions. I do not believe that there are meaningful consequences on their side of the house. So why is that the case? Because we tell you that if an individual is literally immortal, then even like a life prison term, say like 20, 30 years, is not enough to deter them from taking bad actions because it's not a large enough like harm to them. So why is that important? Because on their side of the house, they don't even check the moral system the way that they describe, but they are constrained by laws which they claim they would adhere to. However, on our side of the house, we have the maximum freedom and agency to create the best world for people. As we've demonstrated, you are the preferable moral actor. Let's go off case. The first argument Chert gave is about the uniqueness. And he says that you can do what's good, that we can do good things. Our side of the house, they become become constrained. And they used to make a joke out of this, like, well, it's probably good to have a few constraints. So no, guys. Constraints are only good if those things are constraining you in a positive direction. The issue is that the constraints being enacted on their side of the house are for the perpetuation of America, which if you think America like always does everything perfectly might be fine, but if you think America sometimes has incentives that run counter to the collective good of the world, then that might be bad. We think that constraining yourself with a bad system is also probably worse. What do we do on our side of the house? We constrain ourselves within a framework of altruism and of actually helping people around the world, which we think is ultimately preferable because that leads to better benefits for most people in the long term, which is better than what they're talking about on their side of the house. Please.
Aaron, so you say you are constrained by altruism. What does that mean, and what are these actual constraints? What is controlling your action at all?
Right. So look, here's the thing. In this round, both sides have superpowers, right? But what they've said is we will not break out of prison even if we go. We will not do certain things that we wouldn't have the power to do. We also might have the power to be like idiots, like hurt people. What we are saying is we will choose not to take that action. We will choose in the same way they constrain themselves to the American Constitution, with the American laws, we will constrain ourselves to only activities which we believe promote utile good for society. Things like giving people food. Things like making sure there's not a nuclear war. Things like solving the very problems that both sides agree are important within this debate. Like both sides have chosen to constrain themselves. They're choosing to constrain themselves within a framework of a country which has demonstratively pragmatic interests which run counter to the rest of the world. And we said, don't do that because America isn't always perfect, and we don't buy into the very nationalist sentiments that they present on their side of the case. So the second argument we gave is about the fact that you have infinite time. They basically all they say here is like, well, they need to give a warrant for why this is moral, why you're acting in a moral way. We gave warrants, we explained why that was true, so I don't think this is a meaningful response. We say the fact that you have infinite time is fine. That just means that you are the most moral actor who should be taking these actions. Like on their side house, we could also argue that America has been operating functionally as like the dictator of the world for the last years anyway. So we would say that it's comparative. Like should you have a change to that, which is Superman coming in, or allow that system to continue perpetuating? I think we believe that system's probably been on balance bad. We've seen corruption and destruction worldwide, so we're fine getting rid of that as well. Then we say that you should be skeptical of the U.S. We have arguments about why you're going to be used. You're always going to use to take down terrorists, like invade other countries. We don't get a meaningful response to that. Just well, I guess the response that Dan will try to reapply in PMR as well. Well, no, because you have constitutional rights. They can't make you do things you don't want to do. That's fine. But they also argue that the UN, for example, would only use you if you agree to be constrained, which means we can apply the same argument that America will only use you if you agree to be constrained within their framework, which means that if America then asks you to do something that you might not want to do, if you're going to abide by the contract that you've made with them to help them in national relations, then you would then again be constrained and be required to do what America asked you to do. That is what happens on their side of the house. Then we talked to you about the fact that this is going to cause like more destruction and destroy people, things like this. I don't think any of this is meaningful to deal with. I want to jump one case very briefly. There are a few arguments I think are important that I want to make sure don't get blown up. So one of them is the idea that, so in the first point, the third subpoint as well, we think there's a problem because you tell them that you're better than them, and that makes everyone think that you hate them in all of this. Like this, so first of all, you are Superman. You are superior to them in a number of different ways. On their side of the house, they also try to set themselves as higher than the other humans when they claim that they're going to be the bully pulpit that controls everything else. So I don't understand what the impact of this argument is. What we tell you is that on our side of the house, we are actually creating greater societal good. So if a few people are like unhappy about the fact that you think you're different from them, and that's probably outweighed by the fact that there's no more nuclear war and conflict and destruction for people. They say that you basically become a dictator, not sure if we win morality, see my overview. The second point is about offense. And they say they're going to be able to help America do these things because of low resources. They say America would have taken actions if they had enough resources to do them. That's fine. But so now they're just facilitating all these actions by America. We can take, she was at 10. You're at 9. That's ridiculous. You're at 9:30 when you kept going. So what we tell you is that on our side of the house, on their side of the house, they're going to be constrained by America. It's going to lead to worse actions in the long term because America will not allow them to follow the frameworks that they think are so important. We're very proud to oppose.
Call upon the leader of opposition to open the rebuttal portion of this round. As a reminder, new arguments not allowed. New examples. For a speech of 4.5 minutes. Period.
Thank you, everyone. Superman was originally created as a fictional character to represent the idealization of truth, justice, and the American way. What this means is that in this one man himself, and his powers, his thoughts, his morality, we see the moral optimization of everything the U.S. could stand for in a hypothetical perfect world. Contrast the power we give to that with side government, who gives that power to the sad, paranoid, broken, declining American empire that we have in reality. We give you America as it could be if everything were perfect. I have two main questions. The first is, are constraints good? What we told you from the beginning is that as this is a URU round, your morals are inherently incontrovertibly true to you. They are the result of your life and your thoughts. And that you alone have literally infinite power and infinite time with which to carry them out, meaning it's almost a mathematical certainty that you would want as few constraints as possible. They tell you, but no, constraints need to happen because you have power. But we believe that your power will be better used than power of anyone else. But also they drop some arguments we give you about the bizarre world you live in, where since you will live forever, you can only think of long-term stability because you don't want to eventually be on a world burned to a cinder with no one to talk to. Because you have infinite time, you can learn forever and ever and ever and learn about these cycles of history that just repeat themselves, which the short-minded American public and their shorter-minded politicians are never going to see. We also tell you that unchecked power is essentially a wash in this round. Why? On our side, it belongs to Superman. On their side, it belongs to the U.S., who orders him around. When he subjects himself to U.S. laws, that includes things like the law that you can't dodge the draft, like the law that you can't intervene in another country without Congress or the president or some American entity giving you power, meaning they get to decide where Superman goes and when all the power becomes there. So do we want one state or the whole world order? Third, they kind of make fun of my Justice League advocacy, but I gave you examples of the reasonable limited constraints you would do. You would set up office with the UN, you would work with the UN, you would try to honor agreements, and most importantly, you would always look to never violating national sovereignty, never going beyond arbitration, unless it were absolutely necessary to carry out your ends. Do you know who never does this? The United States of America. Second question I have is, how can you do the most good and the least bad? On their side of the house, you are limited by U.S. law. And Aaron gives you a lot of excellent examples where things that might obviously be for the best good of everyone, like having reasonable farming that's not opium in Afghanistan, might be bad for American cotton producers or corn producers or some other massively powerful group. And so you're going to be limited. You're not going to be sent out well. We also tell you the U.S. is incredibly perverted. And they just say, but guys, by being part of America, you can try to change them. We would tell you by belonging to the world, you can try to change everyone in the world and all these other states who are also perverted rather than your message only belonging to the U.S. But also we would tell you, because you grew up in the U.S., because you represent idealization and you have family there, you still will have some tie. They still will think about you. And we would tell you, more importantly, you can tell the U.S. when they're not following their own principles because you know them better than anyone. We would tell you it's better to work to change the whole world. And we've seen from the past that American unchecked military power does not lead to a safer world for democracy. It doesn't lead to democracy. We would not have the massive totalitarian upheavals in the Middle East. We would not have new Russian belligerent activity if it were not for aggression from the U.S. for 20 years. Most importantly, and completely dropped, nuclear deterrence is dead on their side of the house. Because Superman can stop nukes. Superman can stop anything. And maybe Superman will say, hey, don't nuke Russia over Ukraine. It's not that big a deal. But Americans are warmongers. They don't want to get involved in a long, drawn-out conflict. They don't want to see their power go down. And they're going to let the nukes fly because Moscow can't do anything about it. This is a world of madness. Third, under this point, we tell you, we give you a UN with teeth. I gave you a lot of arguments off case to which we heard no response about why international organizations are more necessary than ever, things like global violence, environmental problems, and such, and why because they have no coercive power, because they have no clear adjudicator who can't say, I'm just secretly advocating for my own side, to make it clear they can't do anything. On our side, things like the UN Declaration of Human Rights, things like the Kyoto Accords, actually can be enforced, actually can start to lead to policy change on the ground in the U.S. and abroad. On their side, the U.S. doesn't care about these things. They never ratified Kyoto. It will never happen. Most importantly, also dropped, we told you, war becomes absolutely unnecessary on our side of the house. Because when Superman in the Justice League can show up and say, give me your best shot, you can't hurt me, I'm going to take the guns out of your hand and literally twist them into flowers and hand them back, there's almost no point in fighting when you know they're going to disagree with you. On their side of the house, everyone knows they can fight as much as they want as long as they don't piss off the U.S. Finally, we would tell you, once again, do you want the rest of the world to hate you and be suspicious of everything you do, or do you only want America to be a little miffed that you didn't stick with them? We're proud to oppose.
Two clear questions. Who ensures that you will be good for the rest of your life? Because I think it's ironic that Aaron literally starts his speech by saying, you guys, We need to worry about utility, and that is how we're going to vote in this round. Exactly, Aaron. You and I disagree about what utility is best for the world, for its people, for America, and for morality. The tiebreaker between our disagreement shouldn't be that you fly or that you run faster, right? When we disagree on something, it shouldn't have to rely on you being physically stronger than me. You're no better than me in that way. What is another thing that we can have on our side of the house? Gee, I don't know, maybe a democracy with millions of people that can talk about things and eventually vote for an idea to make sure that it's good or not. I literally don't understand how you're not frightened by the thought that there could be an individual flying around the world and at one point or another disagree with your morality, disagree with your society's decisions on how to vote for laws or rights, and strike you down. It becomes arbitrary at the point where we have understood that there is no objective morality in the world. Even they say in flip-flop that America has good morality, but sometimes they do bad things. We disagree. We completely agree, and that's why when they go bad, we check against the bad people to make sure they aren't worse and they create more third-party harms. So democracy is the way to check. And remember, we absolutely should consider the voices of the people living in this world, because the actions taken by Superman mostly affect human beings. What system do we want to live in a world in which Superman gets to make decisions that affect millions of lives and they never get to have a say? They tried to say they have a say later, but they kind of knifed themselves in the yellow war. But then Mo says, look, you can constrain yourself through altruism, right? Because we could constrain ourselves to be in jail and not break out. Right. The reason why the caveat is in the case that you will not break out of jail, because any logical being that has any type of selfish kind of behavior says, you know what, I kind of don't want to serve my 45-year jail term, so I'm just going to break out of jail. We caveated that because we understood that people are selfish. You don't have that caveat. You can't say, I hope I'm going to be a good person, and therefore I'll probably be a good person. If that was the case, most people, I think, try to do good and eventually do bad things and harm other people. But then they say, no. People are bad because of scarcity, right? Because people are hungry and they're starving, that's when they do bad things. That's completely true. Bernie Madoff, that guy was starving, man. That guy had nothing. That guy had no money, no resources, no capital. That's why he had to steal all of that money from those innocent people. Actually, no. People do crazy things all the time. Dictators create genocide so they can get more power. This scarcity argument literally makes no sense, but it reinforces what we told you about morality. That morality is so distinct in the minds of a couple of people. We think, how could someone murder 30 people on the fly? We could never internalize that thought, but someone obviously did because they took that action, even though originally their intent probably wasn't, I'm going to be a terrible person today and murder a bunch of people. The way we stop that, though, is to have any kind of check. If this round becomes America's a bad check, we told you that they're improving check. But even if you think they're not the best check, it's best than no check at all on their side of the house. They say jail isn't a deterrent. I think 30 years of isolation, 30 years of no rights, 30 years of not seeing your family and your loved ones is a pretty good deterrent to make sure that you're a good, moral human being. But let's get away from that question, because they lose on that definitely, but then they don't even have a policy. Because who makes the world better? The Justice League, by the way, is just one dude. Let's just make that clear, out of the way. Justice League sounds cool because you picture 8 superheroes. It's Superman and then Jack and Bernie, and they're just regular bureaucratic dudes at the UN who kind of help you out whenever you need some research. That is their Justice League. They go to the UN and they say, hey, there's something happening in Rwanda. Can I do something about it? The United States vetoes it. If it's in their interest, then China probably vetoes it. And if it's in their interest, Russia probably vetoes it. The UN is not the way that you want to go through to get things done, because you never get to do things against the interest of major world superpowers because you can't convince them, right? But where do they knife themselves? The LOR said, yeah, we'll follow them, we'll follow instructions, we'll work with people unless absolutely necessary.
literally listen to this. Like, yeah, we'll follow the rules unless we completely disagree with them, and then we'll do whatever we want. Who draws that line of absolutely necessary to breaking up whatever the UN wants to do? That's the problem. They try to give themselves so much leeway because they're begging the question, aren't we good? Wouldn't you do something good? Wouldn't we all be good in a certain situation? I don't think that you would. But what offense do they have when their only offense is like stopping nukes and wars? We told you, we have every interest in the United States to stop things like ISIS and stop things like nukes because that affects their national security. But most importantly, if they think they're going to win their round on like stopping genocide and stopping human atrocities, that doesn't happen through the UN because it gets vetoed. But what happens on our side of the house? The only reason we told you, as like people, the United States, we don't go into the Middle East anymore and interfere because it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of political capital. Those things we told you are gone at the point where you can take care of operations in a single day. We never got a response to that. So at that point, we literally take all of their offense, but we make sure as individuals we have checks that operations will go well and we won't go power hungry. We're so proud.
Prime Minister, invite folks to shake hands. Thanks everyone for coming. Woo!
Yeah, great.